moisturizers, Lanacanes.
It's 40 past the hour. The Pope is back in Vatican City this morning following a 10-day hospitalization for breathing difficulties. Vatican officials say the pontiff has completely recovered from the flu-induced breathing spasms. Mark Phillips has more on the Pope's homecoming.
Pope John Paul II leaving the hospital, loaded into the Pope-mobile behind a plastic screen put up to protect him from the cold. His departure seemed designed to show that he was again able to carry out at least some of his duties. Clearly illuminated for all to see, the Pope's gaze seemed to reflect the ordeal he'd been through and the further toll it has taken on his health. At several points, he managed a feeble wave. The Vatican says the Pope will consult with his private physician as to what sort of a schedule he can undertake now. But this is the Lent period on the Christian calendar, one he normally spends in quiet reflection. Now it seems he'll spend it in recuperation as well. John Paul returned to a Vatican once more, very concerned with his health and with his ability to lead the Catholic Church. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Rome.
As Mark Phillips reported, it's now the Christian season of Lent, and with an extremely light public schedule for the next several weeks, Vatican officials hope the Pope will regain some strength. 2 weeks before his hospitalization, the pontiff met with Jewish leaders and members of the Pave the Way Foundation, an organization that promotes better interfaith relations. Prior to the visit, the Vatican agreed to allow Jewish scholars to study the original Maimonides manuscripts at the Israel Museum. Maimonides was a 12th century rabbi and philosopher whose writings are revered by Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars. These historically significant papers are owned by the Holy See. When they are shipped to Israel later this year, it will mark the first time many of the Maimonides manuscripts have left the Vatican. And joining us this morning to discuss the importance of the loan are Gary Krupp, president of the Pave the Way Foundation, and Rabbi Benjamin Bleck, a 10th generation rabbi and religious scholar. Thanks for being with us this morning, gentlemen.
It's a delight.
I have to ask you, first of all, the significance of this, especially at this time and what's going on in the world right now.
The manuscripts are probably one of the most important items that exist in the world today as far as the Jewish people are concerned. We have a saying amongst the Jews, from Moses to Moses, there was none like Moses. Moses, of course, the original who received the Torah in the Bible, and Moses Maimonides. They represent the highlights of Judaism, and not only for Jewish people, but for everybody in the world. Maimonides was a philosopher, Maimonides was a doctor, Maimonides was a theologian, and Catholics, Christians, and even Muslims have revered him throughout the centuries. And to have an opportunity to be able to actually see the texts that he wrote is incomparable.
How did the Vatican come to possess these manuscripts?
Well, a lot of these manuscripts were really rescued by the Holy See at times, and the fact is that when we had our visit there, the rabbis had mentioned that we're very grateful for the fact that the Vatican has had these, because had they been in Jewish possession, they may have been destroyed by the Germans, they may have been destroyed by lots of other things, but they've been kept in beautiful condition, and this is an extremely a good thing, which is why it's wonderful that they've given us permission for this loan. Now, the loan itself has major significance because it also spells a wonderful warming of relations between the Holy See and the State of Israel and the Jewish people, which is something that we work very hard to achieve.
And Pope John Paul II has been very instrumental in this, right?
Very much so, very much so. He's he was an incredible Pope, and has been a very, very good friend of the Jewish people and the State of Israel, as he has with all of the religions. He's reached out to every one of the religions to try to repair the ancient rifts that have existed. With our particular visit and our audience with the Pope, we were there simply to thank him on behalf of the Jewish people, and we had a very large audience, as you're aware.
Will Israel ever own these? Will they ever become housed somewhere in Israel?
I think what's so significant is that this marks a new era in Christian-Jewish relationships, and therefore anything is possible. The purpose of our visit was specifically to say thank you, because in light of all of history, this particular Pope has been more warm, has been more giving, has been more understanding of the need for better relationships than anyone else. So we said thank you. If you ask whether it's possible, at this point, anything is possible, because we're in a new age.
On that note, I have to ask you this then. With the complication of things that are going on now, the issues are so complicated among religion and really some terrible things going on based on religion. How do you take this message and apply something written 800 years ago to what's happening now in today's world?
The very fact that religious leaders and and someone of the stature of the Pope expresses this need for better relationship between religions is probably the most important message the world needs today. You're exactly right in that we are seeing so much conflict that's religiously rooted, but we have to differentiate between extremists who take the name of the Lord in vain, who take religion and all of its concepts and distort it, and what I think the greatest leaders of all religions have always understood: love your neighbor, peace, love between people, understanding even if we have different kinds of beliefs. And this Pope is the epitome of that concept, and our visit and all that we are trying to do with Pave the Way represent a fulfillment of this ideal.
Exactly.
Rabbi Black, Mr. Krupp, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and would you thank Maimonides as well?
Maimonides, thanks so much. We'll be right back.
A short time ago, this woman was limited by her mobility. A month ago, this man wasn't even able to get around his house. These are people who chose mobility, and they chose the scooter store. If you're living with limited mobility, call the scooter store today. I guarantee no other company will work hard to make you mobile. If we pre-qualify you for a new scooter or power chair, and Medicare denies your claim, the scooter store allows you to keep your scooter or power chair at no cost. That's the scooter store guarantee.
I expected they'd help me file some paperwork with Medicare and my insurance. I never expected them to be so nice or to work so hard to get me a power chair at no cost to me.
You don't qualify for Medicare? No problem. We'll work with your insurance company, even help with financing. If there's a way, we'll find it.
Call the scooter store for free information today.
Call 1-800-651-0980 for free information. That number again is 1-800-651-0980.
Sore throat pain. It's hard to work, hard to think. No time for ordinary drops. Your sore throat emergency fast with the strongest Cepacol lozenges ever. Cepacol numb sore throat pain fast with Menfocaine action. Menfocaine, 2 anesthetics for fast relief. So effective it's #1 in hospitals.
The pain is gone.
And try new Cepacol dual action spray. Numbs pain on contact. Coats your throat for comfort. Cepacol ends your sore throat emergency.
Airwick Decasphere is the unique air freshener designed to fit your personal style with 2 new captivating scents, Lotus Flower and Blue Orchid, and Magnolia and Cherry Blossom. It smells just as good as it looks. Decasphere, only by Airwick.
I never wore black. My old dangerous shampoo always left flakes, so I switched to Selsun Blue Moisturizing Shampoo. Doctor recommended for flakes and itch, with aloe moisturizers for healthier hair and scalp. Never wear black without the blue. Selsun Blue.
With all the talk about Jose Canseco and steroids,
I injected them.
there's only one place to hear him tell the story. 60 Minutes, Sunday. Bill and Deborah are smokers. They just got a surprise, a tax bill for online cigarette purchases.
This one, they want $1,545.
Now they owe thousands. Tonight, how one city went after online cigarette buyers. If you're a smoker or a taxpayer, see our Friday Consumer Alert on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Police said his father committed suicide. Can he prove it was murder? Saturday.
Here's your up-to-the-minute forecast. Today's satellite picture shows 2 areas of thick clouds, one in the northeast where snow is falling across northern New England, the other in the southwest where heavy rain is threatening to cause more problems for areas that have seen enough flooding this season. Later today, that nor'easter will dump 1 to 3 feet of snow in interior Maine and New Hampshire. Behind the storm, the entire northeast will feel the chill of a Canadian air mass. High pressure but cool temperatures will rule the day in the southeast, and out west, more stormy weather. Look for heavy rain in Southern California and New Mexico. While doctors use many techniques to evaluate a patient's heart, they often can't determine its exact condition without performing surgery. But now, as Dr. Emily Sine reports, the latest generation of high-tech ultrasound is giving doctors a real-time 3D view of the heart without having to pick up a scalpel.
Hi, high blood pressure and complications from bypass surgery means that James Zafaris needs close monitoring of his health. Now doctors are using the latest ultrasound technology to examine his heart non-invasively.
That's very reassuring. It's a lot faster. And you get it over and get done with it, and he tells you exactly what the deal is.
It's contracting appropriately in the manner we would like to see it.
The new technology allows Dr. Jeffrey Stahl to analyze the heart from many angles, creating a detailed 3D image that provides a wealth of information.
This technology captures the heart function, exactly how the heart is functioning, in the chest, three-dimensionally, while the heart is moving over time under different circumstances, looking for coronary artery disease, blockages in the heart, looking for what they call cardiomyopathy, which is muscular heart disease, and thirdly is for valvular heart disease, when the heart valves don't work.
Guys, Maui saw a short 60.
New York bond trader Walter Ruskowitz had no idea he had coronary artery blockage before getting checked out for feeling fatigued.
The doctor said if I hadn't gone to get checked out, and I would have had a heart attack, the odds were very much that it would have been fatal.
Dr. Stahl says ultrasound screening could be potentially useful for millions of people at high risk for heart disease.
How would you grade it as far as improving your ability to make a diagnosis?
I think that it is a evolutionary leap. The information is more sensitive and more specific. We will not, as physicians, make as many mistakes either telling a patient they don't have heart disease when they do, or worse yet, telling them they do have heart disease when they don't.
Dr. Sine reports doctors hope the new ultrasound procedure will allow them to treat more patients. New York Yankee star Jason Giambi says he's sorry, but won't say why. Giambi is at the center of the Major League Baseball steroid scandal and has reportedly told a grand jury he used performance-enhancing drugs. Drew Levinson reports.
Tainted by the baseball steroid controversy, New York Yankee first baseman Jason Giambi finally spoke out.
I put myself in this situation. I take full responsibility for it.
It was Giambi's first public appearance since word leaked about his Balco grand jury testimony last year. In it, he described how he injected steroids into his stomach.
When I went in the grand jury, I told the truth.
1-2 to Giambi.
During spring training in 2004, he denied using any performance-enhancing drugs and said the reason he lost weight was his diet. At Yankee Stadium, the ballplayer apologized for lying.
You know, I feel like I've let a lot of people down, and I want to say that I'm sorry.
Giambi suffered his worst season after being diagnosed with an internal parasite and a tumor on his pituitary gland. Giambi's words could deflect the glare coming from one of his former teammates, Tell a Book. In it, he talks about steroid use among Major League ball players. Disgraced slugger Jose Canseco is said to name names and detail alleged illegal drug use by some of the league's brightest stars, including Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire. Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig Wednesday refused to comment on the book, but he did say he is confident the league's new steroid policy will be effective. With spring training right around the corner, the question is, will others follow suit? Drew Levinson, CBS News, New York.
Elsewhere in sports, it's do-or-die time for the NHL. If the league and players can't agree to end the more than 4-month-long lockout by this weekend, the 2004-2005 season will end before it ever began. Negotiators met for 4 hours yesterday in Toronto. No progress was reported. If talks fail, the NHL will become the first North American sports league to lose an entire season to a labor dispute. In the NBA, Orlando needed a little magic after squandering a 20-point lead over the Hawks. Orlando got off to that early lead thanks to rookie Dwight Howard, who had 15 points and an amazing 20 rebounds. Steve Francis helped Orlando rise above Atlanta's rally, scoring 11 of his 28 points in the fourth quarter. Magic won at 101-96. And the Pistons' Rasheed Wallace grabbed a few more last night against the Lakers. Wallace had 23 points and a season-high 15 rebounds, and teammate Tayshaun Prince had 25 points as Detroit beat L.A. 103-81.
Tayshaun Prince does. It looked like somebody talked to
wake up in the morning and you look outside and it's been snowing all night, you really need to know how much snow we've had and how much more we're expecting before you can leave your house. With Viper, we can get a better idea of how much snow has fallen, where the most snow has fallen, what we also have coming our way if another snowstorm is about to hit. Obviously, people in the morning need to know these things so that they can get out the door more safely. I try to get people ready for the day.
Get through the winter with the area's most watched weather team, morning, noon, and night.
This time we are ready for it.
Due to the September floods caused by Hurricane Ivan, Wicks Furniture Coriopolis has decided to close its store and distribution center forever and is holding a gigantic store closing sale. All fine furniture, bedding, leather, and oriental rugs must be sold at a sacrifice to the first buyers through the door. All famous brand names drastically reduced. If you or anyone you know is even thinking about a new furniture purchase, you must rush to Wicks Furniture in Coriopolis now for the best selection and price. After 30 years in the Pittsburgh area, Wicks Furniture is closing this store forever.
I often stop and wonder, what if? What if I didn't break my leg in front of millions of fans in 1985? My thoughts used to center on my game. Then, like you, I had a family and discovered what worrying was really about. What if something happened to you? How would your family find? Many folks don't have enough life insurance, and if you're counting on what you have at work, consider this. Half of all workers lose their coverage when they retire. Fortunately, there's Life Choice, an affordable offer from Colonial Penn for folks age 18 to 75. It provides up to $25,000 in affordable whole life insurance protection. Applying is easy. No medical exam is required, and once accepted, your coverage cannot be canceled. It fully protects from day one and gives you a benefit amount that's guaranteed not to decrease and a premium that's guaranteed not to increase. For free information, pick up the phone.
Call 1-800-472-1122 to receive free information and a free gift in the mail. That's 1-800-472-1122. Call now.
Every Tuesday and Friday morning, you can hear our comment from London in which one of our contributors from overseas enlightens us about goings-on in the UK or on what the Brits think of us over here. One such report was planned, as usual, for this morning until the royal family hijacked the headlines. Here's Ed Boyle on the royal wedding 34 years in the making.
Now, this is how the screenplay should have read. They met 34 years ago. He, a dashing prince, she, a single girl with royal connections. It was love at first sight, marriage to follow, happy ever after. The end. But you know, you can always rely on the British royals to lose the plot. They did indeed meet 34 years ago, when he had enough hair to cover up those huge jug-handle ears, and she was in the flush of youth. It was love, but instead of marrying, he embarked on a career saving the free world in the Royal Navy, and she got fed up waiting at home. So they both walked up the aisle, but with different partners, and they lived unhappily thereafter. Camilla devoted her life to equestrian pursuits. Charles went organic and talked to his vegetables. They then began a furtive affair while Princess Diana was still alive. Do you remember when she complained on television that there were 3 of us in that marriage and it got a bit crowded? Since her death, the prince has craved public acceptance of his relationship with Camilla. Now, that acceptance could never come while the pair of them remained single. It was, after all, demeaning for the future king to turn up at social events, not with his wife, but with his companion. It's demeaning for her, too. On a state visit to Chester Cathedral recently, he was ushered through the main doors with a fanfare of trumpets, while she was sent round the back to the tradesman's entrance. But at least, at last, it's official. And on April the 8th, bang in the middle of what otherwise promises to be a monumentally dull British general election campaign, the odd couple will marry at Windsor Castle. When he becomes king, she won't become queen. The country wouldn't accept that. She'll become the princess consort. Charles's eldest son, William, by the late Princess Diana, is said to have shrugged his shoulders and quipped, well, anything to stop Daddy being so grumpy. And his youngest son, Prince Harry, who was last seen in public wearing a swastika armband, will be hoping that this party won't be in fancy dress. This is Ed Boyle for CBS News in London.
Makes things seem kind of boring here. This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
For news 24 hours a day, log on to cbsnews.com. Experience CBS News.
CBS News Up to the Minute. Is it a threat, and why now? North Korea claims to have nuclear weapons and pulls out of disarmament talks. And what the FAA did and did not do about hijack warnings before 9/11, and what the government kept from the public. Good morning, everyone. This is CBS News Up to the Minute. I'm Melissa McDermott. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld is in Iraq this morning on another surprise visit. He touched down before dawn at a U.S. airfield outside the city of Mosul. Rumsfeld is spending time with wounded soldiers, meeting with U.S. and Iraqi military leaders, and reviewing new Iraqi security forces. The trip comes amid growing concern about an implied nuclear threat by North Korea. The communist government confirmed for the first time it has a nuclear weapons arsenal and has no intention of giving it up. It also pulled out of the six-nation disarmament talks. CBS's Aline Sergani has more.
It came as no shock, but still, the announcement from North Korea that it has nuclear weapons dominated the news at the end of Condoleezza Rice's European tour.
The creation here of nuclear weapons programs cannot be acceptable.
It's the first time North Korea has publicly admitted to a nuclear program, saying it needs them to defend itself from an increasingly hostile United States. But the Secretary of State assured there is no plan to attack, and she urged North Korea to disarm.
There's a very clear message. Give up these aspirations for nuclear weapons, and, life can be different.
The North Koreans also say they're pulling out of six-nation talks between the United States, South Korea, Russia, China, and Japan. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld called the situation troubling.
One has to worry about weapons of that power in the hands of leadership of that nature.
Some think North Korea may be bluffing to get economic and diplomatic concessions before more talks. And the nuclear claim can't be verified since North Korea kicked out UN monitors 2 years ago. This whole situation now poses a daunting challenge for President Bush, who during his first term called North Korea part of an axis of evil, and started his second term vowing to use those six-nation talks to disarm the country. Aline Sergani, CBS News, Washington.
5 months after the final report of the September 11th Commission, details of what the government knew about terror threats prior to the attacks are still coming to light. A newly declassified section of the report focuses on the Federal Aviation Administration. It says the FAA was warned dozens of times about the threat of hijackings and suicide operations within the United States. The report concludes the FAA was more concerned about flight delays and the financial health of airlines than the threat posed by Osama bin Laden. CBS's Bob Orr reports.
In the summer of 2001, airlines, Congress, and the FAA were all worried.
We've been waiting here for hours
about congestion and delays. But the 9/11 Commission says federal aviation officials should have been focused on a more deadly threat. A heavily blacked out report, held since August and just released by the Bush administration, reveals the FAA received 52 intelligence warnings mentioning Al-Qaeda and/or Osama bin Laden in the months leading up to September 11th. 5 of the alerts focused on terrorist training for hijackings, and 2 concerned suicide missions, though not involving airplanes.
I'm saying the FAA failed, as Congress failed, as intelligence agencies failed.
Tim Romer, a member of the 9/11 Commission, says the persistent warning should have triggered alarms.
Increasingly, there were concerns about something domestically, and that domestic activity might include some kind of a suicide hijacking.
The FAA did warn airlines terrorists may attempt a suicide hijacking, but then also stated, fortunately, we have no indication that any group is currently thinking in that direction. Officials did not tighten airport security or hire more air marshals, explaining the warnings were too vague.
The FAA did not have any credible, any specific information which indicated the type of attack we saw on September 11th was planned or even possible within the United States.
It's not clear that beefed up security would have stopped the attacks, since the knives the hijackers carried were legal at the time.
Most of the hijackers were flagged by the profiling system. Many of them were stopped at checkpoints. Some of the bags were looked at.
That system, I don't think, did work. When 19 out of 19 people can scam the system, beat the system, and end up hijacking these planes.
The system now has been tightened. Billions spent to secure airports and planes. But critics ask why it took 9/11 to force the changes.
and whether what's been done is enough to defeat the threat. Bob Moore, CBS News, Washington.
Other recommendations of the 9/11 Commission are closer to becoming law. The House voted to make states verify driver's licenses are not being issued to illegal immigrants. The bill also gives judges broader power to deport political asylum seekers they suspect may be terrorists. And it allows completion of a fence along the U.S.-Mexican border south of San Diego. On the other side of Capitol Hill, the Senate passed a bill to shift large class-action multi-state lawsuits to the federal courts. The goal is to prevent trial lawyers from shopping class-action suits around the country, looking for small state courts where multi-million-dollar awards are common. 18 Democrats joined Republicans to pass the bill. Local elections continue throughout the weekend in Saudi Arabia. So far, there have been no reports of vote fraud. Preliminary results are expected tomorrow. CBS's Sheila McVicker has the story from Riyadh.
They're not voting for much, just 7 seats on the Riyadh City Council. But the fact that they are voting at all makes this a very new day in Saudi Arabia.
It's really nice experience to be able to pick your representatives.
It was a day historic enough to bring children to witness. But in this election, from which women have been banned, the only Saudi female we found at a polling station was 9-year-old Noura. Her father was making a very deliberate point.
I think it should be for everybody. I mean, it's not only for males and females.
There is debate here about the rights of women, about reform in a country where the royal family rules, about the meaning of the vote. Saudi officials talk of this as being an experiment. And what is not yet clear is how firm the government's commitment is to reform and democracy. That is perhaps because the royal family itself does not know where this will take them and the country.
They are trying to do as much or as little as they can to quiet things.
That is why, in spite of American pressure to pick up the pace, some Saudis argue slow is good.
Slow is not dead slow. Slow is logical slow.
A small step, a very big symbol, and a lot at stake. And still, so much work to do. Sheila McVicker, CBS News, Riyadh.
Pope John Paul II made a very public exit from the hospital, not in an ambulance or limousine, but in his Pope-mobile. The Vatican wants the world to know the 84-year-old pontiff has recovered from his bout with the flu. The Pope had been rushed to the hospital 9 days earlier, suffering from breathing problems. And we have more news in 2 minutes.
Menopause. It's more than hot flashes and mood swings. It's about gaining weight in places we never gained weight before. As we approach and enter menopause, our bodies undergo dramatic physical and emotional changes that make losing weight more difficult each and every day. But now, there's Estrin D, the first diet pill specifically developed to overcome menopausal and premenopausal weight gain. Not only will Estrin D help balance hormonal changes so you feel great, Estrin D also increases resting metabolic rate, automatically reduces caloric intake, and provides the energy you need to get through the day. With Estrin D, losing weight is easy again. Estrin D, the first and only diet pill specifically developed to help menopausal and premenopausal women lose weight. Estrin D will change your life. Guaranteed.
Call in the next 15 minutes and find out how you can receive a 1-month supply of Estrin D absolutely free. Call 1-800-450-4451. That's 1-800-450-4451.
The natural beauty, the rich heritage, the tranquil vistas. You can experience it all in North Carolina. Start planning your North Carolina getaway today. Call this toll-free number now for your free North Carolina travel guide.
He found a treasure. She found a gem. He found his rhythm. She found her groove. He found a road less traveled. She found her inner child. And sometime that special vacation, they both found each other all over again. Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. Whatever you're looking for, you can find it here, including yourself.
It's 10 past the hour. Tort reform was a big plank in President Bush's re-election platform. Now the president is poised to make good on his promise. On Thursday, the Senate approved a law making it harder for consumers to win big damage awards in class action suits. The House votes on the measure next week. John Roberts gives us the details.
This is just the first step in the president's broader agenda for liability reform. The Senate on Thursday voted to shift class action suits above $5 million involving plaintiffs from multiple states to the federal court system, which historically has been far less receptive to such cases. The goal is to prevent attorneys from shopping class actions across the country to find the most friendly state court where they could win huge awards. President Bush said he welcomed the vote, particularly since 18 Democrats signed on to support the bill, and he believes it will give momentum to two other important agenda items that he ran on: medical liability reform and a cap on asbestos lawsuits. But those two issues are far more problematic for Democrats, and it's not likely that President Bush will find the same bipartisanship there that he got with the class action vote. John Roberts, CBS News, the White House.
The government says it's addressing security problems at the nation's nuclear weapons research lab in Los Alamos, New Mexico. But as Cheryl Atkinson reports, the investigator who first told CBS News about the problems now says he's further troubled by the lab's refusal to show him a particularly sensitive part of the facility.
Don Brown was hired by Los Alamos in 2003 to attack quality problems at the lab. It's not just what he saw that disturbed him, it's what he didn't see.
ESA and DX areas are there, and ESA is where the tritium facility is.
The top secret X division, arguably the most important and powerful division at the lab. If the X division sounds familiar, it might be from past scandals. It's where the government claims China obtained secrets for a most sophisticated nuclear warhead, where 2 computer hard drives with sensitive nuclear weapons data disappeared. And the X division is the source of the physics behind our nuclear weapons, where some of the best scientists in the world do their most important work. Brown was stunned to find no evidence the X division had ever been audited properly. When his team got the assignment, they didn't even get a foot in the door when an X division manager blocked them.
He said, "You can't come in. We don't recognize your authority."
Is it proper that the group being audited gets to tell the auditor, you have no authority and we're not going to let you come in?
Absolutely not.
In the end, lab managers didn't get Brown's team in either. They were only allowed to review paperwork off-site. Even at that, they concluded the system might not capture items that may pose a potential safety problem, and lapses in training and qualifications put the effectiveness of the nuclear weapons program at risk. He laid out his concerns in reports sent to the lab and Energy Department officials. Today, U.S. nukes are no longer tested in full-scale explosions, making it all the more critical, Brown argues, that the X division's work gets proper scrutiny. Without it,
You can't say with confidence that those weapons will perform their design function.
energy officials wouldn't agree to an interview, but point out that the nuclear stockpile is certified every year, and any potential issues are thoroughly investigated. Brown says certification is one safeguard, but no substitute for a hard look at the whole process. He considers the X division audit that didn't happen an issue of national security. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Los Alamos, New Mexico.
North Korea's declaration that it has nuclear weapons came as a bit of surprise, not so much for the content of the message, but for its timing. Kim Jong-il's government has long hinted it is working on nuclear weapons to fend off what it sees as a threat of invasion by the United States. How likely is it the North actually has the bomb, and how should the United States proceed in light of it? Jack Pritchard is a former ambassador and special envoy for negotiations with North Korea and a visiting fellow of foreign policy studies at the Brookings Institution, and he joins us from our Washington bureau. Good morning, Ambassador Pritchard.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Thank you. Good to have you. You worked as a negotiator for the United States in North Korea. What impact do you think Pyongyang's announcement will really have, if it has any at all?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, the most important thing is they've walked away from the six-party, the multilateral framework for the talks. It's going to be much more difficult to bring their weapons program back into compliance with their obligations under the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The second part of that is what's leading most of the news events, and that is their public declaration that they are a nuclear weapon state. We've known for some time they certainly have had the capability, they've had the parts, they've had the scientists, they've had the know-how. They've in fact had all the ingredients, and we've long suspected they may very well have had a few nuclear weapons. They've told us privately, yes, they had them, but this is the first indication that they've made a public declaration that they're a nuclear power. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for the Chinese and the South Koreans to overlook this fact as they begin talking with the United States about what are next steps in dealing with North Korea.
Talking about, though, I heard one analogy one time that dealing with North Korea, and you might be able to agree or disagree with this, is like dealing with a temperamental child who throws temper tantrums when it doesn't get its way and to get attention. You see this as maybe just another attempt at getting attention and possibly getting something from the U.S.?
Well, a lot of times the North Koreans deal in what people will term as brinksmanship tactics. This may have an element of that, but that's not the primary motivation. This is not an attention getter. This is not something in which they wish they were in the limelight, as Iran is these days. But it is something in which the timing was right for them to make the announcement. But most people believe that they were going to announce that they would be participating in the next round of six-party talks. So it's a little bit of a surprise that they've walked away.
Well, the United States, you mentioned Iran. The United States is issuing warnings against Iran's intentions of a nuclear program and using words like unfortunate to describe North Korea's nuclear admission. What does that say?
Well, one of the things that the North Koreans do is they take a look at what U.S. policy is among the axis of evil that the president announced in his State of the Union message in 2002. And so how we dealt with Iraq played an important role of how the North Koreans see their future relationship with the United States. How we're dealing now with Iran also plays in that same way. You could have taken a story that was written a few days ago, right before Secretary Rice went on her trip, in which if you'd exchanged the words Iran for North Korea and Asia for Europe, it would have made perfect sense to the North Koreans that this was U.S. policy towards North Korea instead of U.S. policy towards Iran.
Now, there has been some speculation, too, that Condoleezza Rice made a comment about saying North Korea was an outpost of tyranny.
Right.
And this is in reaction to that. Do you think that's what it is?
Well, that has a lot to do with it, not as a singular incident, but the North Koreans have said all along that they wanted to take a look at the lineup for the second Bush administration, take a look at what the policies probably would look like, and then make a decision as to whether or not they wanted to continue down this road of negotiations. And what they've said through their announcement today is they've made that evaluation. They've taken a look at this administration, the second administration, compared it to the first. They've compared the statements that the president made during his inauguration regarding tyranny. They've listened very carefully to Condoleezza Rice's congressional confirmation hearings when she labeled North Korea as an outpost of tyranny. They've connected the dots in their own mind, and they've come up with a suggestion that if the United States had something positive to say to overcome all of these evaluations that they've made, they might still come back to the talks. But not hearing anything in a positive sense from the administration, they've come to the conclusion that the next 4 years might be worse than the last 4 years from their point of view, and they simply have walked away at this point.
Do you think that is all they're looking for then, is something positive that would bring them back to the six-nation negotiating table, or is it going to take more than that? And this is a double question. Do you think the multi-nation approach will work?
Well, I've long held that the multinational approach is the correct way, but it is insufficient. It lacked a dedicated and sustained dialogue within that six-party process between the United States and North Korea. That's the missing component. I never believed that we were going to get to a final resolution without that element of a direct dialogue between the United States and North Korea. But now it's going to be far more difficult to get the North Koreans back to the talks.
All right, former ambassador and Brookings Institution visiting fellow Jack Pritchard, we thank you so much for joining us.